Hello, Vancouver. Glad you can join me. Today, trees. What happens if you cut them all down? The myth of Erysichthon is a warning tale about exactly that. I'll read it to you. It comes to us from about the time of Christ. Ovid was one of Rome's most famous poets. Some people still think a myth is a false explanation for things science knows better. I think it's more interesting than that. This myth helps us understand the destruction of the natural world through human greed. A couple of names you need to know. Ceres, goddess of agriculture and fertility. Our word cereal has her name in it. Erysichthon was a king. Dryads were tree nymphs. And I'm reading to you just a part of Ted Hughes' translation. Please find it and read the whole thing. Erysichthon gave to the gods nothing but mockery. Without a qualm, he cut down every tree in the sacred grove of Ceres, an ancient wood that had never before that day jumped to the axe's stroke. Among those trees was one prodigious oak, all to itself, a tangled forest. Its boughs were bedecked with wreaths and devotive tributes, each for a prayer Ceres had sometime granted. Dryads there danced a holy circle around its bole or joined hands to embrace it, a circumference of 20 paces. Erysichthon ignores all this as he assesses the volume of its timber, then orders his men to fell it. Seeing their reluctance, he roars, "If this tree were your deity that every clown adores, and not merely a tree you think she favors, nevertheless those twigs up there at the top would have to come down as the rest falls." He snatches an axe and hauls the weight of the broad head up and back. But in that moment, as the blade hangs poised for the first downstroke, shudderings swarm through the whole tree to its outermost twigs, and a groan bursts from the deep grain. At the same time, every leaf, every bough goes grey, every leaf whitens, and every acorn whitens. Then the blade bites, and the blood leaps as from the neck of a great bull when it drops under the axe at the altar. Everybody stares paralyzed. Only one man protests. The Thessalian Erysichthon turns with eyes stretched, incredulous. "Your pious cares," he bellows, "are misplaced." And he follows that first swing at the oak with another at the protester's neck, whose head spins through the air and bounces. Boing, boing, boing. Then the oak, as he turns back to it, pronounces in a clear voice these words, "I live in this tree. I am a nymph, beloved by Ceres, the goddess. With my last breath I curse you. As this oak falls on the earth, your punishment will come down on you with all its weight. That is my consolation, and your fate." Erysichthon ignored her. He just kept going, undercutting the huge trunk till ropes brought the whole mass down, jolting the earth, devastating the underbrush around it. All the nymphs of the sacred grove mourned it. Dressed in black, they came to Ceres, crying for the criminal to be punished, bewailing the desecration. The goddess listened. Then the summer farms, the orchards, the vineyards, the whole flushed, ripening harvest shivered as she pondered how to make his death a parable of her anger. If his cruelty, arrogance, greed had left him a single drop of human feeling, what the goddess now would have drained mankind of its pity. She condemned him to hunger, but infinite, insatiable hunger, the agony of hunger as a frenzy. We have to skip the journey to visit hunger, a personality, but this is what she looked like. In shape and color, her face was a skull, bluish, her lips a stretched hole of frayed leather over bleeding teeth, her skin so glossy and so thin you could see the internal organs through it. Though hunger lives only in opposition to Ceres, yet she obeys her. She soars through the darkness across the earth to the house of Erysichthon and bends above the pillow where his face snores with open mouth. Her skeletal embrace goes around him. Her shrunk mouth clamps over his mouth, and she breathes into every channel of his body a hurricane of starvation. The job done, she vanishes. She hurtles away out of the lands of plenty, as if sucked back into the vacuum, deprivation's hollow territories that belong to her and that she belongs to. Erysichthon snores on. But in spite of the god of sleep's efforts to comfort him, he dreams he sits at a banquet where the food tastes of nothing, a nightmare. He grinds his molars on air with a dry creaking, dreaming that he grinds between his molars a feast of nothing. Food is like air. At last he writhes awake in convulsive cramps of hunger. His jaws seem to have their own life, snapping at air with uncontrollable eagerness to be biting into food and swallowing like a cat staring at a bird out of reach. His stomach feels like a fist gripping and wringing out the mere idea of food. He calls for food. Everything edible out of the sea and earth, and when it comes, dearth is all he sees, where tables bend under the spilling plenty, emptying bowls of heaped food, all he craves for in bigger bowls, heaped higher, food for a whole city cannot sate him. Food for a whole nation leaves him faint with hunger. As every river on earth pours its wealth towards ocean that is always sweeping for more, draining the continents, and as fire grows hungrier the more fuel it finds, so famished by food, the gullet of Erysichthon, gulping down whatever its diameter can manage, through every waking moment spares a mouthful only to shout for more. This voracity, this bottomless belly, as if his throat opened into the void of stars, engulfed his entire wealth. But none of it was enough. Whatever he ate maddened and tormented that hunger to angrier, uglier life, the life of a monster, no longer a man. And so, at last, the inevitable, he began to savage his own limbs, and there, as a final feast, devoured himself. There's a horror mixed with some very black humor here. In the late stages of famine, the body actually starts to consume itself, just like Erysichthon. The poem is full of powerful contrasts, tranquility and aggression, feasting and famine. Like Erysichthon, we want everything now. He thinks the tree is a free resource, but doesn't realize the living world is all interconnected. As soon as he cuts into the sacred oak tree, Ceres knows about it. Erysichthon's disrespect, invasion, damage of property causes a violent reaction. Like him, we underestimate nature's power. The destruction of the rainforests of Indonesia, Congo, and the Amazon literally causes famine in Somalia. The ancient myth of Erysichthon speaks to the greatest ecological disasters of the present. It warns us against the arrogance and sacrilegious disregard for all other life forms with which we share this planet. Next time, something mysterious. All things think.